he acquired more land, increasing his holdings to over 300 acres, and was made an elder of the local Baptist church. The Bells also had 3 children after moving to Tennessee. Elizabeth, or Betsy, was born in 1806. Richard was born in 1811, and Joel was born in 1813. One day in 1817, John Bell was inspecting his cornfield when he encountered a strange-looking animal sitting in the middle of a corn row. This animal had the body of a dog and the head of a rabbit. Bell shot at it several times, after which it vanished. Bell thought nothing more about the incident until after dinner. That evening, the Bells began hearing deep, faint knocking sounds on the outside walls of their log house. These mysterious sounds continued with increased frequency and force each night. Bell and his sons often hurried outside to catch the culprit, but always returned empty-handed. In the weeks that followed, the Bell children began waking up frightened, complaining that rats were gnawing at their bedposts. Not long after that, the children began complaining of having their bed covers pulled from them and their pillows tossed onto the floor by a seemingly invisible entity. As time went on, the Bells began hearing faint, whispering voices, which sounded like a feeble old woman singing hymns. The encounters escalated, and the Bells' youngest daughter, Betsy, began experiencing brutal encounters with the invisible entity. It would pull her hair and slap her relentlessly, often leaving welts and handprints on her face and body. The disturbances, which John Bell told his family to keep a secret, eventually escalated to a point that he decided to share his family trouble with his closest friend and neighbour, James Johnson. Johnson and his wife spent the night at the Bell home, where they were subjected to the same terrifying disturbances that the Bells had experienced. After having his bed covers removed and being slapped repeatedly, Johnston sprang out of bed, exclaiming, "In the name of the Lord, who are you, and what do you want?" There was no response, but the remainder of the night was relatively peaceful. Some years later, Betsy became engaged to local boy Joshua Gardner. For some reason, the entity did not take to Joshua, and repeatedly told Betsy to break off the engagement, tormenting her for months and weeks, until she could no longer take it, and eventually broke off the engagement. What was the Bell Witch? Like with such stories, certain details vary from version to version, but the account is said it was the spirits of Kate Batts, a mean old neighbour of John Bell, who believed she cheated him in a land purchase. On her deathbed, she swore she would haunt John Bell and his descendants, but sure enough, tradition says the Bells were tormented for years by the malicious spirit of old Kate Batts. John Bell and his favourite daughter Betsy were the principal targets. Toward other family members, the witch was either indifferent, or, as in the case of Mrs. Bell, friendly. No one ever saw her, but every visitor to the Bell home heard her all too well. Scary stuff. So, our next story will be the fascinating tale of the Vanishing Hitchhiker. subsequent point, the passenger appears to vanish while the vehicle is in motion. In many cases, the hitchhiker vanishes when the vehicle reaches the hitchhiker's destination. A common variation of the above involves the vanishing hitchhiker departing as would a normal passenger, having left some item in a car, or having borrowed a garment from protection against alleged cold. The vanishing hitchhiker can also leave some form of information that allegedly encourages the motorist to make subsequent contact. In such tellings, the garment borrowed is often found draped over a gravestone in a local cemetery. In this, and in the instance of imparted information, the unsuspecting motorist subsequently makes contact with the family of a deceased person and finds that their passenger fits the description of a family member killed in some unexpected way. The driver's encounter with the vanishing hitchhiker occurs usually on the anniversary of their death. A similar version exists in Japan and is called Fatal Fair. The story concerns a lone taxi driver making his way along a road during the night. Legend goes that a person will suddenly appear from the night darkness and hail the taxi. The person will only ever sit in the back of the car and will ask to be taken to a place the driver has never heard of. When the driver mentions this, he is assured that he will be given directions. The passenger then feeds the driver increasingly complex directions, which leads them down streets and alleys, though many towns, and even some distances away from the city to the countryside. After travelling this distance, and still seeming no closer to any destination, the driver becomes uneasy. He turns around to the back seat to ask the passenger exactly where they are, but he's shocked to find the passenger has vanished. The taxi driver turns back to the steering wheel, only to drive off the edge of a cliff. It's pretty freaky, but you haven't heard the start of it yet. Next, the spooky tale of Erzsebet or Elizabeth Bathory, aka the Blood Countess. Elizabeth Bathory was born in 1560 to a wealthy and prominent family. She was a woman of exceptional beauty. Her long raven hair was contrasted with her milky complexion. Her amber eyes were almost cat-like, her figure voluptuous. She was excessively vain, and her narcissism drove her to new depths of persuasion. The Countess would spend days in front of her large dark mirror she had designed herself. It was so comfortable that it even had supports on which to lean one's arms, so as to be able to stand for many hours in front of it without feeling tired. Also, Elizabeth became acquainted with the art of inflicting pain and death. In the same time, she was also developing an interest in black magic. Thorgo, a servant in the castle, instructed her in the ways of witchcraft, at the same time encouraging her sadistic tendencies. Elizabeth captured servant girls at the castle after she moved to Vienna in 1604 and took them to an underground room known as Her Ladyship's Torture Chamber and subjected them to the worst cruelties she could imagine. Under the pretext of punishing the girls for failing to perform certain trivial tasks, Elizabeth used branding irons, molten wax, and knives to shed their blood. To the one who had stolen a the same coin, red hot, which the girl had to hold tight in her hand. To the one who had talked during hours, the Countess herself would sew her mouth shut, or otherwise would open her mouth and stretch it until the lips tore. Bathory beat her victims routinely and mutilated them as well. Reportedly, she froze some of the snows of the winter near the castle, dumping ice water on them in the freezing weather. Soon, the Countess began attacking her bound victims with her teeth, biting chunks of bloody flesh from their necks, cheeks, and shoulders. Blood became more of an obsession with Elizabeth as she continued her tortures with razors, torches, and her own custom-made silver pincers. She even managed to bring into the castle the worst instruments of torture. A famous automaton known as the Iron Maiden, and initially devised in Nuremberg, was placed in the torture chamber. This clockwork doll was the size and colour of a human creature, naked, painted, and covered in jewels, with blonde hair that reached down to the ground. It had a mechanical device that allowed it to curve its lips into a smile and move its eyes. For the maiden to spring into action, it was necessary to touch some of the precious stones in its necklace. Elizabeth would instruct a servant girl to fix the jewels on the Iron Maiden, and when a certain jewel moved, the maiden would grab the girl, spikes would come out of the breasts, and the girl would quickly bleed to death. Once the sacrifice is over, another stone in the necklace is touched, the arms drop, the smile and the eyes fall shut, and the murderess becomes once again the maiden, motionless in its coffin. A cage, too short to stand in, but too narrow to sit in, was one of Elizabeth's favourite toys. It was on a pulley and had dozens of spikes jutting into the cage. The cage would be swung back and forth, so that the girl inside would be torn to pieces on the spikes. As Elizabeth aged, her beauty began to wane, and she tried to conceal the decline through cosmetics and the most expensive clothes. The story says that one day, a servant girl accidentally pulled her hair while combing it, and Elizabeth slapped the girl's hand so hard she drew blood, which fell into her own hand. She immediately thought her skin took on the freshness of that of the young maid. She thought she had found the secret of eternal youth. Following the witch's instructions, Elizabeth had her evil henchmen kidnap beautiful young virgins, slash them with knives, collect their blood in a large vat. Then the Countess proceeded to bathe in the virgin's blood. When she emerged from the blood, she had seemingly regained her youth and radiance. Elizabeth's minions procured more virgins from the neighbouring village on the pretext of hiring them as servants. As the body count grew, Bathory's servants dumped the corpses outside the castle. When local peasants found the dead bodies drained of blood, rumours quickly spread that vampires inhabited the old fortress. When our society. A fortnight later, only 2 were left. Elizabeth accused one of them of killing others for jewellery and then committing suicide. But even though Elizabeth tortured young noblewomen and accompanied the bloodbaths with witchcraft rites, she could not retrieve her lost youth. For over a decade, she perpetrated her acts of vampirism, mutilating and bleeding dry 650 maidens. Prime Minister Thurzo of Hungary, who was a cousin of the Countess, stormed the castle with soldiers to arrest the Countess and her associates on December 30th. At the head of the contingent of armed men, Thurzo arrived unannounced at the castle. In the cellar, cluttered with the remains of the previous night's bloody ceremony, he found a beautiful mangled corpse and 2 young girls who lay dying. But that was not all. He smelt the dead. He saw the walls splattered with blood. He saw the Iron Maiden, the cage, the instruments of torture, bowls of dried blood, the cells, and in one of them a group of girls who were waiting their turn to die, and who told him that after many days of fasting they had been served roast flesh that had once belonged to the bodies of their companions. Elizabeth never attended her trial, and all of her torturers, accused of witchcraft and vampirism, were beheaded, except for Eleanor Zhu and Dorothea Santas, whose fingers were pulled off before they were burnt alive. The Countess, simply charged with murder, was found to be criminally insane and was walled up within a room of the castle. Last but not least, we move on to the legend of Sleepy Hollow and Ichabod Crane. The Headless Horseman legend originates in the town of Sleepy Hollow, which is located in the state of New York. It is believed that the individual identified as the Horseman was a male German soldier from the 18th century. These soldiers are often identified as being Hessians. These types of soldiers were hired directly by individual rulers that were associated with the British Empire. Hessians fought in numerous conflicts. However, the majority of the battles that they engaged in were related to a conflict known as the American Revolutionary War. A specific fight that took place is referred to as the Battle for Chatterton Hill. In this conflict, it has been estimated that a total of 51 Hessians were killed. The individual known as the Horseman was killed in this battle when the cannonball shot by the Americans severed his head. The rise of the Headless Horseman. Once the conflict that took place for Chatterton Hill was completed, the individual that is now known as the Headless Horseman was buried in a local graveyard located just outside the churches in the region. Only a short amount of time passed before many individuals in the area started to report the fact that they had seen the spirit of this individual. It was reported that it was obvious that the individual was killed in battle because of the fact that he appeared to be obviously decapitated, rode on a horse that was dark in colour, and had his head resting on the back of the horse. Individuals that were subjected to this malicious spirit often sensed a high level of anger and felt as though they were in danger. Many individuals that have presumably come in contact with this angry spirit state that he uses his head as a weapon against the living. In addition to this, reports have been made that the horseman carries a sword. Many variations state that the spirit also has an axe. Ichabod Crane. In order to gain a full appreciation for the Headless Horseman urban legend, it is important the story of the Headless Horseman is fact or fiction, it's considered to be one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of all time, but several still search to uncover the truth of this mystery. Okay, so about 26 minutes left, so I'm going to finish off by reading some Japanese urban legends. Fair warning, I read these for the first time and they did scare me quite a bit. Okay, I'll start with Akamanto, otherwise known as Red Cape. Akamanto is a spirit which haunts bathrooms, usually the last stall in the woman's or girl's bathroom. Some versions describe him as wearing a mask to cover his extremely handsome face, which had caused him stalking problems in life. When the unlucky victim is on the toilet, a mysterious voice will ask them if they want red paper or blue paper. If you answer red paper, you are killed violently and drenched in blood. If you ask for blue, you are strangled or bled dry, leaving your face or skin blue. Attempting to ask for any other colour of paper will result in hands appearing that will drag you to the underworld. In other versions, the ghost will simply ask you if you want a red vest and will then rip the skin from your back. He could also ask you if you want a red or a blue cloak. The only correct answer is to refuse anything he offers. Okay, this is the tale of the Kuchisaki Onna. Apologies, I've pronounced that wrong. Also known as the slitmouthed woman. Children walking alone at night may encounter a woman wearing a surgical mask. This is not an unusual sight in Japan, as people wear them to protect others from colds or sickness. The woman will stop the child and ask, "Am I beautiful?" Most children will answer yes, in which case the woman asks, "How about now?" and removes her mask to reveal the mouth has been slit from ear to ear. Regardless of whether the child answers yes or no at this point, the woman will kill them. Some are very creepy. A similar urban legend to the slitmouthed woman is the Bunny Man. The Bunny Man is an urban legend that originated from two incidents in Fairfax County, Virginia in 1970, but has been spread throughout the Washington, D.C. area. There are many variations on the legend, but most involve a man wearing a rabbit costume, hence Bunny Man, who attacks people with an axe. Many variations occur around Bunnyman Bridge, the concrete tunnel of a southern railway overpass on Colchester Road in Clifton. Story variations include the origin of the Bunnyman, names, motives, weapons, etc., and the possible death of the Bunnyman. The legend has circulated for years in several forms. A version naming a suspect and location was posted to a website in the 1990s and states that in 1904 an asylum prison in Clifton, Virginia was shut down by a successful petition of the growing population of the residents in Fairfax County. During the transfer of inmates to a new facility, the transport carrying the inmates crashes. Some prisoners escaped or were found dead. A search party finds all but one. During this time, locals allegedly began to find hundreds of cleanly skinned, half-eaten carcasses of rabbits hanging from trees in the surrounding area. Another search for the area was ordered, and the police located the remains of Marcus Wolster, left in a similar fashion to the rabbit carcasses. Hanging in a nearby tree In the time approaching Halloween, carcasses are said to be found hanging from the overpass in the surrounding areas, and a figure is reported